It's so interlinked once again. In this video, we are dealing with the question number 5 for Zimsec Advanced Level History Specimen paper. Enjoy.
Right. Saka onaika guys panapa. Todaita question. Hanzi Zoni, how far did the economic suffering by the third state in the period to 1789 precipitate the French Revolution? Saka, we are focusing how far did these economic suffering, how far did the suffering kana kuti ma-problems anechekuita nema-economic issues emufrance andika kuchema kwaita vanhu towards the economic quagmire as according kunana Thomson wanani zvakaafecta sei kuti tizosvika pakuti revolution ive andika. So first and foremost chinhu chekutanga apa haisi nyaya yekuti ukawana question unongomhanyira kuti nekuti French Revolution ndakaita. Remember, this is a full paper in which we are revising. Saka une bepa rako une mukana wekuti iwewe kana takupa bepa rako kana kuti kana wapuwa wadhukoiti yo question paper une mukana kunatsoona kuti iyi question ndikuikwanisa here kana kuti iri kuita sei iri kundiremera ubata nyaya dzacho. Saka pana apapa this question was very simple. Why? Ngatinyore kuti candidates were required, candidates are expected to show how did the economic suffering, on other words anogona kuita ma-problems. How did the economic suffering or problems in France catalyzed the French Revolution? Those who about to precipitate, how did they increase? How did they manage? How did they spark the French Revolution? However, good candidates cannot forget the impact of political and social factors. The impact of political and social factors. So, I've listed some of the economic factors that can be included, which include poor harvest, taxation, financial crisis, unemployment, forced labor, to mention a few. Then here we've got political factors: monopoly of judicial political position, right to vote, incessant wars, press censorship. In terms of social, we've got privilege system, right to information, religious freedom as part of our points. Saka pana patiri poor harvest, as I always explain, but in your points unofana kubuditsa kuti point yako ndeipi, explanation yako ndeipi, supportive evidence yako ndeipi, analysis dzako ndedzipi apa. But most of the time ukakwanisa kupa point ukaexplain ukanatsopa maybe with the added examples ezvinhu zvauri kutaura ukanatsogona kudzoka back to the question, still unongokonzidonzwa waita sei wagona. So in your introduction you have to master the art that the examiner anofana kuona kuti zveshuwa question waita sei wanzwisisa kuti we are focusing on the economic suffering. So in your introduction you are going to include kuti yes, the economic suffering in France have contributed much to the outbreak of the French Revolution, taking consideration of the poor harvest, the impact of the poor harvest, the impact of the taxation system, among other factors. These factors they've attributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution. However, without forgetting to turn back the cake, we can take note of the political and the social factors. For example, we have issues like the monopoly of the judicial system, also the incessant wars they've attributed, and also the issue of the privileged system. yakacontributa kuti tiwane French Revolution. Saka tiri ipapo manje takuda kuexplaina. Furthermore, taking consideration of the poor harvest, this is one of the major factors which have sparked the French Revolution, in the fact that when there was a road to urban migration, and as people they were clamored in the cities of France in search of food and in search of better jobs, because in the countryside there was shortage of food, as according to Peacock. How would you get these individuals, as they clamored in the cities of Paris, where there was no industrialization? As a result, they started to reside within the streets of France, and they managed to be called the Paris mobs. These so-called Paris mobs, they started to form political clubs, which ended up removing the ancient regime from power. That's why Dennis Richards noted that 1 hungry man is much more deadly than 100 lions. Why? As these people were affected by hunger, they planned even the march of women. How to get? Ndingokuvhura brain maexplainere mamwe imwe maexplainere anogona poor harvest ndeyekuti when there was a poor harvest in France, it led to the shortage of basic commodities such as bread and salt. As these commodities were at lack, it causes to the skyrocketing of basic commodities. So these individuals, as they were suffering from the skyrocketing of basic commodities such as bread, the members of the aristocrats, they were pressuring the king to hold banquets. And this angered the Paris mobs, who were stung most by the skyrocketing of basic commodities, and they started to revolt for a change. In fact, they wanted a king who could provide them with the basic needs, cannot with their daily basic needs. Zvikazoita kuti pave nerevolution. Saka tine maengo akatowanda ekunyora nawo apa unoshaya 1. Ubata nyaya. Then ichipera toenda pataxation inonzi inequitable tax. In France there was inequitable taxation system. How did you get? In terms of inequitable taxation system, it was a system whereby the peasants, they were paying tax at the expense of the first class and the second class. And at the same time, they were unemployed and they were lowly paid. So they started to revolt that they need to have uniform taxation system in France, for which the members of the aristocrats and the king himself, they failed to avert such practices whereby all individuals in France could pay tax uniformly, and this sparked the revolution. As people they were throwing spanners in the streets of France, claiming that if we are going to pay tax, everyone must also have to pay tax. Saka the fact yekuti taxation yakaremera vamwe vakabva vafunga kuti no, let us remove this ancient regime because it is corruptive. So simple. My financial crisis. France was affected by the outbreak of by the poor financial crisis, the poor organized financial system, where the king used to spend more money than they could earn, than they could gain through revenue. For example, could have Mary Antoinette, according to Dennis Richards, she could order about 10 pairs of shoes per month. She could even build a luxurious mansion for her unborn child. And this have left the financial warehouse of France in deficit. Saka, this have contributed people to revolt, because at the time whereby there was a lack of financial resources in France, someone was busy flourishing with that man. Saka, let us remove this type of government because it is not well organized. For us to have a organized government, we must remove government yakadhakwa tipinze imwe papa. Wababata chete zvatopera uri explain. Then unemployment inogona takakulinga pauti ine iyi but zvinotisiyane. How are we going to say so? Techitaura kuti by 1788 1789 in France there was a poor industrialization. There was no production in France because of poor economic policies implemented by the king, Louis XVI, and by the nobility and the bourgeoisie. Poor policies, not as they were implementing poor financial and poor industrialization policies. This have led to high unemployment rate. And due to high unemployment rate, very few people could afford to pay rentals. Very few people could afford to buy food. As a result, this have led many individuals to roam within the streets of France. And it created the so-called Paris mobs. According to David Thompson, he called them the Shakwaris. Why? They've developed a violent character. And they did not fear for death, to an extent that they practiced the march of women in order to show how impetus was to be unemployed to the king. And in the following morning, the king ushered that he addressed them, and he stated that he was going to reduce the prices of bread. Saka iwewe king kana tauya kumba kwako tikauraya mabodyguard alright unoteerera. Saka our next move ukatakukubvisa because tikakupa impact unonzwisisa. Saka ndosaka uchizoona pachitaurwa nyaya yekunzi zvoni before, according to T.A. Morris, before the revolution, the kings they lived in seclusion at Versailles. But after the march of women, individuals they started to see that we can revolt to the king and he could change the policies. Saka ndosaka wakazoona kuti after march of women vanhu vari kuya vachita more pressure vakutaura kuti takuda triple C. Ubata mama kuri kuenda nenyacho. Saka this unogona kuto explain uchidaro. Then panapo autaura nyaya forced labor. According to Thompson, it was not the issue of land. It was not more about the issue of taxation, according to Thompson, which have led to the outbreak of the French Revolution. But he could say that there was forced labor within the serfs in France, whereby the bourgeoisies or the landowners, they could take the peasants by force and they could work for them. So they were now revolting about the issue of forced labor, which made them kuti varwadziwe stere kuti why tiri kuitwa slaves in our own country. We must remove this government from power because it's unfair, according to Thompson. Ndo view yake akatoya nayo kuti no, this have contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution. Saka kuma economic factors apa ndatsanangura kana pana nemvunzo bvunzo toonesana kuti papi pari kunetsa. Because iwewe kana uchiexplaina nyaya usaexpecte kuti uri kutaurira inini ndikuziva kana kuti usaexpecte kuti examiner ari kuziva zvinhu zvakuita zvakutaura. Iwewe kana uchipa point ka ipe woiexplaina nyaya apa ndikutokangana hangu ipe iexplain isupport. Anoona kuti ndima points angu ndikubva ndauya neview kuti ningi why ndiri kuisa Thompson nekuti ndikakuudza kuti forced labor yakakonzeresa kuti vanhu vade kubvisa government unoita naro. But tikakupa verdict yemunhu akazvinyora, you could believe the fact. Ndosaka uchiona kuti kukoti munhu akaenda hanzi une mhosva yemedha obva arega kuudzwa kunzi constitution yedu inoti pachapter yakati subsection yakati ndo yatakusunga nayo. Because iwewe ukanzi izvoni inini zvandakangoita akauya mumba mangu achida kundirova bva ndamubaya nebanga vanoti hey, self defense but munhu wakamuuraya. Because attempted murder it's a crime. Zviripo takazvinyora muconstitution. Asi kana zvisina kunyorwa unenge wahwinawo kuti aiwa imbovhurai timboona. Uri kubata nyacho. It's all about evidence of a written document to prove mafacts. Tabatana? Ndosaka uchiona kuti scholar review inodiwa. Because uchamakirwa nemunhu pamwe anofarira Dennis Richards, pamwe asina kumboverengawo T.A. Morris. Example yandikutaura. Saka pamwewo zvinhu zvauri kunyora wakazviverenga kune rimwe source, you have to show to prove your point. Tabatana? Right. Saka kana mune mubvunzo mubvunza. Topfuurira mberi toenda uko tonoexplaina zvofara. Kana pana nemubvunzo. Nana une mubvunzo.
Ndinoda kubvunza pamwe kuti mabourgeoisie pachikani.
Unoda kubvunza kuti mabourgeoisie aida.
Mabourgeoisie angasimba nekumiddle class.
Mabourgeoisie iti ndosaka ndati it depends nekuti kuverenga bhuku ripi. Andika? Mabourgeoisie kuzongoreva kuti mbinga Uzozvata. Saka kwaiti vane mpingawo dzekufirst state. Zvakafanana right, let's talk of Zimbabwe. Mabourgeoisie emuZimbabwe akawanda ka. Tine mabourgeoisie akaita saWikine. Wikine haana position in politics. Hani munoziva? He's not a minister. He's a middle class. But tine mabourgeoisie vakafanana nekuti ukada kuona we could have ministers. These are part of the political arena. Vari kutoto include kuti vari kufirst state. Mubabataka. Saka mabourgeoisie vanogona kunzi vari middle class, vari second state, vari first state. But pakuzotaurwa hawo kwavo vakawanda vanozongonyanya kuti vari middle class. But middle class kakureva kuti ndo because you could not be a bourgeoisie usina control government. Because ndo vane mapolicies akawanda vanoita sei avanenge vachirana. Wabata ndosaka wakaona iwewe kuti pakatanga kuda kufoma National Assembly panonzi vamwe vaiti hatidi kujoina mapeasants nekuti havana mari. Uba ndosaka uchitonzwa zvichizonzi pakafomwa National Assembly yakaita calm down. Why? Vanga vasina mari. Dei mabourgeoisie yanga ari part of the peasants zvaireva kuti dei government yakanga ine mari noti vanga vakafanda kudhara. But ava vana kubvira vambouya uku kumapeasants they are not part of it. Saka kana vari manobility kapatataura vari part of the kuranwa kuri kuitwa government. Because ndo vanhu control politics ka. Wabata. Handi imwe mvunzo bvunzai. Kana pane imwe question unoda kubvunzwa kana pasina tienderere mberi. Right. Tobva taenda pa impact ema-political factors. Uri kuona iyi point yanga uchitaura Brian yekuti monopoly of the judicial and the political possession. When you are saying that individuals are monopolizing the political and the judicial system, it means that no one, even if you could qualify, you could get into that position. Yango kanzi nema qualification akaita say. Remember in France, there was a situation whereby an individual was born a general. Just because your father is a general in army, it means automatically you are also a general in. Just because your father is a king, you are automatically born a king. Just because your father is a nobility, is a minister of foreign affairs, you were born a minister of foreign affairs. Saka turikuti wewe kana uri mwana wa Munangagwa uri kungozvarwa uchingoziva kuti ndichatonga hakuna kuvhota, hapana democracy, that's monopolizing. So these issues of having a monopoly in judicial and political possession, it made to precipitate the revolution in the sense that the members in the second class and in the third class, they were revolting to hold these positions because actually they knew that these positions they are held by qualification, not by birth. That's why Dennis Richards could noted that men are born free, but everywhere are in chains. He was referring that they are in chains of the government, whereby they could not exercise other political, social, and economic benefits, but this government was practicing it, whereby vaitoita kunge ndechemumba mavo. Wakambonza uchiona inonzi chaibva mumba. Zviya zvekuti kana uri mwana wasabhuku unongoziva kuti but hazvisiri zvokuti mashandira zvinotoita. Wababata. Saka izvozvo ndo zvavaida kubvisa. Zvekuti they wanted to break that chain yakataurwa naDennis Richards yekunzi ivo vasungirirwa kunzi haukwanise nyange une ability yacho. Wababata. Right. Tapedza ipapo. Tobva taenda pa right to vote. In France, there was a system type of government which was known as the type of government in France. The ancient regime, whereby it used the inheritance system for it to function altogether. So as a result, they could not allow individuals to choose new kings and new leaders for certain positions. As a result, this angered the members of of the second class and the third class because they could not have exercise in any political participation. According to David Thompson, the king was saying, the state is mine. Andika, aitoti nyika ndeyake, zvataura ndizvozvo. Are we together? Saka, if they could not have the right to vote to choose another king, there was now a problem. Why? Because they've discovered that Louis XVI was incompetent. There was need for him to be changed from office. But because of the ancient regime type of system of government, Agarampa Ariko, though he failed to avert the poor harvest, he failed to avert unemployment, he failed to avert so many other policies in France. Akangosiwa aripo, why? System irikuti hapana right to vote. According to the impact of the philosophers now, paitaurwa kunzi there must be separation of powers. According to Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So this implication whereby there are other individuals who are preaching the idea that there must be separation of powers in politics, and others they say there is no separation of power in politics. It sparked the revolution. Why? We need change because the king is incompetent. Then incessant wars. The king himself is involved France in incessant wars. Incessant, it means unnecessary. How to get? France joined the American War of Independence, and it did not benefit anything. Rather, it increased many deaths in France, which also clamored to inflation. How to get? So this have angered the peasants that the king is now borrowing money, is now investing in a war whereby we are not going to benefit from that war. So it's better to remove this king from power because he does not have the ability. Instead yekuti tishandise mari ndizoka kuvaka maindustry, instead yekuti tishandise mari iyoyo yataendesa kuhondo kutengera vanhu vane nzara chikafu, tiri kutora mari tono ipa independence kuAmerica tosara tiine nzara. Saka iwe ukaita, ndakambopa example yekuti ukaita baba handitika oudza mwana wako kuti iwe handidi kukuona uchikwata kunext door but usingakwanise kumuprovide maneeds anoda, waita an incompetent father. Saka as a result mwana iye achakuvenga. Bata nyaya dzacho. Right, then izotapedza, then tobva taenda pasocial tine nyaya yeprivilege system. Apa hatidi munhu anoswera achitinyorera ziparagraph rekuti mufrance paiva nefirst state, third state nechifirst state yaenjoya chakati, second yaenjoya chakati. That's wrong information. Your point could just only say the privileged system precipitated the revolution in the sense that the members of the third state, they were exempted from political, social, and economic benefits. For instance, the members of the third class, we are explaining, they were exempted from hunting activities. They were exempted from zvakawanda zvavairambidzwa kuita munozvizivanika. So as they were exempted from these privileges, according to them, they revolted for liberty, fraternity, and equality. According to H.O. Pico, this is my scholar now. They were saying equality, liberty, and fraternity to all individuals in France. Men are born free, but everywhere in chains, according to Dennis Richard. As a result, if you fail to provide equal system in terms of all social classes, it means that patotangama one. Because the men are born free. Oh, we are all French citizens. Why are exempting us from hunting? Why are exempting us? Why are you clamoring us to pay tax? Why least then to right to information. Individuals were restricted to information. Are we together? They were not allowed to criticize the government. They were not allowed. There was arbitrary arrest in France, where individuals could not have representatives to represent them in the court of law. So as a result, these people, they felt that the best way to treat this wound of failing to have right to information, they must expose or they must demote the government from power. That's why Louis XVI was exposed. And right, then to our religious freedom. In France, Catholicism was the only religion which was equitable for worship. Individuals, they were not given the ability to worship. But according to their minds, with the precipitation of the philosophers, they were told that religion is a choice. Are we together? There must be separation of powers between the church and the state. So in that ability where individuals, they wanted to have a separation of the church and the state, these have made individuals to revolt against Louis XVI, who could not give people religious freedom. As a result, the French Revolution was witnessed in France. So this is our question number 5. Yapera, any question? Kana pane unoti unone mvunzo nayo otaure.